On this Thursday night, not exactly as advertised. A reality check on Ottawa's plan for an international vaccine passport.
What there needs to be is some criteria set by a global agency.
Fresh financial help.
We're now in a new phase.
The new pandemic benefits coming, who qualifies, and which programs are about to vanish. Paving the way to lawsuits. A ruling from Canada's highest court on snow removal, safety concerns, and who's liable. And a piano man's top prize. The Canadian who hit all the right notes at a prestigious competition.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Lots to get to tonight on COVID-19, travel and government support. Big changes and billions more in funding are coming to federal pandemic support programs. There's also news about vaccines for kids. We begin with a step towards an international vaccine passport in Canada. The government says it has a plan for a standardized document for travel, and it's not creating a new federal proof-of-vaccination passport for international travel. Instead, it's relying on what the provinces and territories are already rolling out. The federal government says provinces have agreed to create passports that have a similar look. All will feature a scannable QR code plus a Government of Canada logo. It's available in some provinces and territories already, but not in others. The government says it should be available everywhere by the end of November, when it will be required to board a plane or train in this country. Abigail Bimman has our top story tonight.
Each province is responsible for its own certification, and depending where you live, you may already have one of these. But Canada is what makes it national to help with international travel.
Not every business owner around the world may know where New Brunswick is, but they do know Canada. Having that unifier, I think it's incredibly important.
You can already get it in Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, and all 3 territories.
We are on track to deliver our QR code, proof of vaccination credentials, in mid-November.
But you're going to need 2 at the moment, and we'll see how we go in the months ahead, how we can bring those 2 together.
All provinces and territories have agreed to a national standard that will be an accepted proof of vaccination for destinations around the world.
But accepted by whom? A QR code here can't necessarily be scanned everywhere.
We can basically lead a horse to water in terms of taking our vaccine apps and our QR codes out internationally, but we can't guarantee how they're going to be received by other countries.
What there needs to be is some criteria set by a global agency. The only one that we really have is the United Nations.
There are details to be worked out domestically, too.
The travel experience right now is very confusing for Canadians.
Airlines are advocating for a government body to check certification at airports rather than frontline staff.
Those details are in real time being negotiated.
For the vast majority of people, at the virtual check-in, where they simply have to scan their QR code and they will get a boarding pass that is clearly marked upon it, vaccination approved. So there is no actual slowdown.
Amid confusion, one thing is clear. If you travel, make sure you do your research about what the country you're going to requires, both in terms of proof of vaccination and any testing. The airline and travel and tourism sectors believe this passport is a step in the right direction, but are still lobbying the government to drop measures such as the PCR test to return to Canada in order to return their industries to normal. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
The other big news in Ottawa today, more money for pandemic support programs. The federal government says it has set aside more than $7 billion to spend between now and next May, and several existing support programs are coming to an end. As David Akin explains, the government is shifting to a more targeted approach, focused on the tourism and hospitality industry and hardest hit businesses.
We are announcing what we very much hope and believe is the final pivot.
The final pivot. It's the Liberal government's plan to replace expensive, broad-based support programs with more targeted and limited financial help.
We're now in a new phase, one that is very different from
from the darkest days in our fight.
Most of the support in this new phase will be for travel and tourism businesses, which can continue to get a 75% wage subsidy. But employers in other sectors would have to show at least a 50% drop in revenue just to qualify, and that would only get them a 10% wage subsidy.
The bar is too high and the subsidy too low to make a big difference for many businesses that are hanging on by their fingernails.
Support for individuals will be limited to specific situations. For example, if a local public health authority imposes a temporary lockdown, Canadian workers could be eligible for a $300 a week benefit.
We're putting this insurance policy in place now to ensure that provinces, territories, and municipalities can continue to make the right public health choices.
New Democrats say the Liberal plan is unacceptable.
We know that there are a lot of Canadians who are still depending on these benefits while we're right in the middle of the fourth wave.
While Conservatives have been pressing for weeks to wind down support programs they say are adding to dangerous debt levels.
We do support programs that are going to get us through the pandemic, but we also believe there has to be a plan in place that's going to get a grip on our national finances.
The minority Trudeau government needs at least one opposition party to endorse their plan, their final pivot, which means you can expect lots of political horse trading when Parliament returns in November. Donna?
Okay, David, in Ottawa, thank you. The federal government confirmed it is set to receive millions of doses of the pediatric vaccine once it's approved by Health Canada. 2.9 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine made for kids aged 5 to 11 will be shipped if and when it's deemed safe and effective. That is enough for every child in that age group across the country. The company made its formal application for approval this week, though Prime Minister Trudeau urged parents and kids to be patient. Young children will be given about 1/3 of the dose given to people aged 12 and up. The province of Saskatchewan says 3 more critically ill patients will be transferred to Ontario this weekend. ICUs in Saskatchewan have been over capacity for weeks now, and new modeling suggests the numbers will keep climbing unless new restrictions are put in place. The pressure is intense, not just on healthcare workers, but on families of those whose loved ones are being flown thousands of kilometers away. Heather Yourex-West reports.
Joanne Fellner does not have COVID-19, but for the last 3 weeks, the 75-year-old Regina woman has been in intensive care. This week, her family received word she could soon be moving to Ontario.
My dad received a letter, just more of an information letter, saying that all ICU patients are considered for a move. There are no exceptions.
A surge in COVID-19 patients has pushed ICUs far beyond their usual capacity. So far, 6 patients have had to be sent out of province for care. 3 more patient transfers are planned for this weekend.
It's tough on families, and it's quite traumatic both for the teams that are having to put patients through this and also for the families. But unfortunately, there isn't really any other good option.
The province has 136 ICU beds available, but according to modeling released by the Saskatchewan government, without new public health orders, there could be more than 200 ICU patients in the province by the beginning of next year. Only scenarios that included booster shots for those over 60 combined with gathering limits project ICU numbers being brought under control. The situation so serious, Saskatchewan's chief public health officer was brought to tears.
I have no shame in pleading to the public that, we've gone so far and, we just have to pull along for the next few weeks and months. And, it is distressing to see what is happening in our ICUs and hospitals. And I'm sorry, it's a very challenging time.
The Canadian Medical Association is calling on the Saskatchewan government to bring in new public health measures now.
We cannot possibly accommodate 200 critically ill patients. That is an impossibility. We will not be able to manage that number of patients without either evacuating them to other provinces or implementing triage.
A cold reality already forcing families to send their loved ones far from home. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
New Brunswick has recorded 2 more deaths from COVID-19, bringing the provincial death toll there to 101. Premier Blaine Higgs calls it a terrible milestone.
These are not statistics. These are people with family and friends. I hate that we are back here after all we have done and worked so hard to combat COVID.
Higgs acknowledged the anger at his government's decision to lift public health restrictions in July, admitting mistakes were made, but he called hurtful comments demoralizing to his team. New Brunswick has the highest death toll in Atlantic Canada from COVID-19. Circuit breaker measures have been extended for at least another week. A Supreme Court of Canada ruling today involving snow removal could send a chill down the spines of municipalities and cities across the country. In 2015, a woman in Nelson, BC, seriously injured her leg trying to climb over a plowed snowbank. She accused the city of creating a hazard and sued. She lost her initial lawsuit, but that was overturned on appeal, and the case made it to the Supreme Court of Canada. In a unanimous ruling today, the court said municipal snow removal activities are not immune from claims of liability or negligence and ordered a new trial. The decision is being closely watched nationwide. Many cities and provinces were interveners in the case. A former chief strategist for former U.S. President Donald Trump has been found in criminal contempt of Congress. Steve Bannon has refused to cooperate with the committee investigating the January 6th insurrection in Washington. Some Republicans believe that's because his testimony would directly implicate Donald Trump in efforts to overturn his 2020 election defeat. Jackson Proskow explains what the ruling means and what happens now.
With a vote split by loyalty to a former president,
we need to make it clear that no person is above the law.
Members of Congress formally requested criminal prosecution of Steve Bannon, a key Trump ally. This week, the committee investigating the January 6th siege at the U.S. Capitol found Bannon in contempt after he refused to provide documents or sit for a deposition. Bannon's testimony is seen as critical based on statements he made on his podcast the day before the attack.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen, okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different.
Like other Trump allies, Bannon claims his communications with the former president are protected by executive privilege.
We know when people have destructive evidence, damning evidence for themselves or others, they're unlikely to testify if they don't have to.
The refusal to cooperate has fueled intense speculation about Trump's direct involvement in the attempt to overturn the election.
They suggest that President Trump was personally involved in the planning and execution of January 6th.
Trump has gone so far as to urge other former aides not to cooperate and has filed a lawsuit to block the release of documents that detail his conversations on January 6th.
Until you have the facts, it is not time to move on. That's why you investigate.
It's up to the Attorney General to decide whether or not to prosecute Bannon. No matter what the committee ultimately uncovers about Trump's involvement, it's unlikely to sway Republican voters who still believe Trump's lie about a stolen election and who think the deadly violence at the Capitol was merely a protest. Against the backdrop of investigations comes Trump's plans for a comeback in 2024. The signs he'll run again are growing stronger. He's even planning to launch his own social media site. Truth Social, as it's known, is supposed to be an alternative to the platforms Trump was banned from in the wake of his lies about a stolen election. Donna?
Jackson Proskow in Washington, thank you. New developments in the case of the MP murdered in Britain. Coming up, the man who's been charged and what's known about his background. There is some breaking news tonight from Buckingham Palace. A spokesperson says Queen Elizabeth spent last night in hospital. The palace confirms the 95-year-old monarch underwent what they call preliminary investigations. She returned to Windsor Castle at lunchtime today and is said to be in good spirits. Earlier this week, the Queen was forced to cancel a trip to Northern Ireland after doctors advised her to rest for a few days. New COVID-19 infections in the UK have topped 50,000 a day for the first time since July. Despite the increasing surge in cases, Britain's Prime Minister is resisting calls to reimpose any restrictions.
The numbers of infections are high, but we're within the parameters of what the predictions were, what SPI-M and the others said where we would be at this stage, given the steps that we've taken. So we're sticking with our plan.
While on a school visit to Northern Ireland, Johnson said they plan to combat the surge with the vaccine booster shot rollout. One UK doctor, though, called the government's inaction willfully negligent. Over 139,000 people in England have died, including 115 on Thursday. The man arrested after the fatal stabbing of British MP David Amess has now been charged. He's 25 years old and accused of murder and preparing acts of terrorism. As Crystal Gamansing reports, police also revealed some of the accused's alleged activities in the months leading up to the attack.
Nearly a week after the shocking attack on a longtime Conservative politician, the British public got their first look at the accused. Ali Harbi Ali was being held under the Terrorism Act. Police had until Friday to lay charges or release him.
Ali Harbi Ali, aged 25 and from North London, has been charged with murder and the preparation of terrorist acts contrary to Section 5 of the Terrorism Act 2006.
Court heard that for the past 2 years, Ali had been planning an attack, and just last month it's alleged he visited the Houses of Parliament to conduct surveillance. The Crown says he supports the so-called Islamic State. The British man was arrested last week at the scene in Essex. MP Sir David Amess was meeting with constituents at the back of a local church. Ali had reportedly scheduled an appointment with him. The MP was stabbed several times and died of his injuries on site. Amess was the only victim, Ali the only suspect. Details about him are still emerging. While he was born in the UK, he has Somali heritage, and his father at one point worked for the Prime Minister of Somalia. Following the killing of the 69-year-old MP, the safety of politicians has been in the spotlight.
I must update the House that the threat level facing members of this House is now deemed to be substantial.
Investigators continue to build their case, but officials have said no other details will be made public as it's now before the courts. The accused will be back in court on Friday. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Still ahead, the volcano on a Spanish island that won't stop. How long scientists say the eruption could last. Waves of lava keep creeping deeper into a village on the Spanish island of La Palma. Hundreds of people were forced to flee their homes overnight as the lava destroyed buildings. Since the volcano started erupting in September, nearly 7,500 people have fled, and scientists say the eruption could continue for another 3 months. Ahead of the next UN climate conference, COP26 in Glasgow, documents leaked to Greenpeace reveal some countries are lobbying behind the scenes to water down the upcoming science panel report on global warming. Greenpeace says the documents show countries such as Saudi Arabia, Australia, and Japan are asking the UN to downplay the need to reduce the use of fossil fuels as quickly as the draft IPCC report suggests, and that Australia rejects the conclusion coal-fired power plants should be shut down, even though ending the use of coal is one of the goals of COP26. Brazil and Argentina, two of the world's top beef producers, want to remove messages about the benefits of plant-based diets. Countries are expected to provide input, but the leak shows serious pushback days before they will be asked to make significant climate commitments. All countries are supposed to announce tough new targets for reducing emissions, and richer countries are supposed to be helping poorer countries finance green plans. At this point, most are falling short. Coming up, passionate performance. A Canadian musician wins a prestigious prize. That is an award-winning performance of Chopin's Piano Concerto in E minor. And at the piano is Canada's Bruce Xiaoyu Liu, who has just won one of the most prestigious piano competitions in the world. He was one of 12 finalists from all over the world at the competition in Warsaw, Poland, an experience Liu says was something he dreamed of. Mike Drolet on the man behind this stunning performance.
For 20 seconds, the audience sat in absolute silence, waiting for Bruce Xiaoyu Liu to do something remarkable. He began softly, showing a delicate touch on the keys to open the Friedrich Chopin piano competition in Poland. Three days later, his final performance ended with a flourish. and a coveted title.
And the winner of the competition is Bruce Canada.
To put it in perspective, the Chopin competition is akin to a tennis or golf Grand Slam event, except it's only held every 5 years. In 2015, Canadian Charles Richard Hamelin finished in second. Just like Liu, he was a former student in Montreal of the incredibly proud Richard Raymond.
To have a Canadian second 5 years ago and have a Canadian first this time, this is historic. I mean, this is really historic. Never happened, never, in any big competition.
Liu began playing piano at age 8, but he says it was just a hobby, along with another passion, go-karting. But anything he did, Raymond says, was with an unmatched intensity.
I mean, I never saw such a focus, such a consistency in playing. It's one of the reasons why you won, I'm sure, because it's not fun for the other candidates. I mean, because the guy will not budge.
You really feel that you're like in your own world and you forget really about everything else when you play or practice.
It's different for the audience. No one who witnessed his finale performance will soon forget the focus and technique of what they saw and heard. Mike Drolek, Global News, Toronto.
Amazing stuff. That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is from Harrington, Quebec, just northwest of Montreal. Thanks for watching. Farah Nasser will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I'll see you on Saturday at 7 for the new reality. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.